so that people can keep her memory alive for their children. Well, I was asked to write this picture book about Odetta. It wasn't my idea. I was asked to do it. I didn't know who Odetta was. And when I looked her up, I actually looked up one of her clips on YouTube, and it's a clip of her singing Waterboy, which is a work song, and it's a black and white video. She's this big-bodied woman with this big old guitar and this neat afro and a voice that filled my being. And after the 1-minute clip of her singing this song, I said, I'm supposed to write about her? I was terrified. So it took me about 2 months to write the poem. But before that, I went to go see her sing at B.B. King's. And it turned out that I knew someone that knew Odetta, and I was able to go backstage and meet her. It happened that Harry Belafonte was there that night in her dressing room, so I shook his hand as well. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. And what amazed me about Odetta was she was pretty, up there in age, and she had just had a hip surgery, so she was in a wheelchair. And before she went to sing, she basically unhooked herself from her oxygen machine and sang for 45 minutes. And when I read some of her subsequent interviews, she mentioned that, I'm singing until the day I die. So that night after the show, I was elected to help Odetta home. And I took a cab with her up to Harlem, where she lived, East Harlem. And I escorted her up to her space. And she lived in a tiny little apartment right by Central Park, a little cluttered space. It turned out Odetta was quite a collector. She kind of had an OCD, actually. And so there were just cluttered books and magazines, and she just seemed like someone who didn't throw things away. And I basically tucked her into bed and helped her from her wheelchair. And my last vision of her was in bed, still dressed for the stage. And then she died about a year later. And so I had always hoped that I could say this poem for her. When I got it down and I got it in my body, I was away, and I said, when I come back to the United States, I'm going to find Odetta, I'm going to say this poem for her. And I never got a chance to do so. So I'd like to think that when I say this poem, that she hears me. So hopefully Odetta is in the room tonight. This is my ode to her, accompanied by Adam Faulkner. Backing me up. Someone in Birmingham, Alabama, long, long time ago, must have accidentally burned the Christmas ham. Was it Birmingham or Birmingham, where Odetta learned to pound sound from Auntie's piano? In little Odetta's mind, she was wildly famous, playing for a sea of her folk, Mr. President clapping from the front row. Now, Auntie loved her niece and all, but not as much as she hated those headaches Odetta's piano playing caused. So Odetta had no choice but to shut the lid on all those pretty keys, zip the lip on her wildly famous dreams that she could make black keys and white keys work together to create amazing sound, cause in the Deep South, round Odetta's parts, black and white didn't mix so well. And when they did, it was mighty gray. Sometimes folk, it could be downright depressing. Folk bending their backs in cotton fields from sunup to sundown, spirituals blooming from split lips, prison men on the chain gang dressed in stripes and chains, singing songs like slaves, working together like keys to create beautiful and furious prison songs, songs of joys and sorrows, songs of rivers and sparrows, sorrow songs sung by the miracle Marian Anderson, tunes composed by cotton-picking greats, melodies peppered with the and of back-breaking work. Jeez. Times were crazy, man. This cat named Jim Crow was so popular, kids Odetta's age must have thought he was president. He had signs above every fountain in the South saying whites only and for coloreds. These signs made Odetta look down. Were there fountains for her and her mama? It made Odetta feel not quite right. She and mama weren't white or colored. Just like the world isn't up or down, she and mama were brown. One day, mama announced they were moving to Los Angeles, someplace way on the other side of daylight. 6-year-old Odetta never heard of this place in all her little life. Took her 6 tries to say it right. And the day they boarded the train to California was one Odetta would never forget. 'Twas the day she met President Jim Crow himself. His eyes were glacier blue, his hair the color of smoke. Seemed she came all the way from White House land just to tell Odetta's folk that they had gone too far. They were sitting in the wrong train car. Whites up front, blacks in the rear, said Jim Crow's pin-sharp eyes and needle-straight hair. Now this Jim Crow cat must have enjoyed being lonely. He done turned water fountains, bathrooms into washing machines, for whites or for coloreds only. Everyone watched Odetta's folk load their lives up in their arms and exit the car dang near tiptoe, all 'cause Jim Crow said so. Odetta's black fist clenched and unfurled, clenched and unfurled. What could she do? After all, she was just a scared black girl in this grown-up, messed-up world. And this black girl from Burning Man, Alabama had no song to sing, no pot to stir her sorrows in. The birdcage in her throat imprisoned her bird, its door tightly hinged. Farewell, Birmingham, from the cramped Jim Crow car, from the cramped Negro car. And in Los Angeles, city of steeples, there was only one kind of water fountain, the kind for thirsty people. When Odetta grew good and tall, she learned Jim Crow wasn't a man at all, just a bunch of silly laws meant to remind black folk to pause and feel badly about themselves. Jim Crow, no heart, no lungs, just daughters and sons. Mama could finally afford Odetta piano lessons now that she was a teen. Remember all those pretty keys shining like Afro sheen? Odetta peeled back the lid, still determined to make black keys and white keys work together to create incredible sound. Odetta found freedom by accident the day she opened her mouth and closed her eyes and sang. For once she saw no color. That's when she shook hands with harmony. The birdcage in her throat grew too small for her bird, and its door unhinged. There it goes. There goes Odetta again with that bird in her throat. And when she opens her mouth, it soars high, higher than angels fly. And how folk love to watch that bird fly high then dip low. Whenever Odetta sang, even Jim Crow couldn't tell her no. And Odetta couldn't just sing. Odetta could sing. To sing is to sing like you need the music as much as birds need sky. Have you ever heard a song come from deep in the knees? Have you ever heard her baby cry? Baby, Odetta's guitar. Pure heaven clothed in wood, string, silence. Named babe because it weighed a ton. Named babe because she held it like one. There's the prince of pop and the king of rock and roll, but they're the egg whites, so who's the yolk? Odetta, queen of folk. Folk music, bulldozer of sound. Tunes that paved the way, created the fray, make you cry like pepper spray. Watch poets swoop up guitars, bob their heads, and pick their fingers numb, trying to echo that Odetta strum. Watch women kink up their hair, look in their mirrors, and feel better. Thousands of women rocking the fro known as the Odetta. The microphone, her throne. The Odetta, her crown. When the queen of folk closes her eyes and sings hard, she travels all the way back down to the swamps, the cotton fields, the chain gang, the church. To Jim Crow said so, to heck no, we won't go, to her very first memories, spirituals and melodies peppered with the and of spirit-breaking work. Now, we may not all sing the same, but we could all sing along. Let's sing with the Queen of Folk this wildly famous song. This little light of mine,
I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Black keys and white keys working together to create harmonious sound. Thank you.